Congratulations on the release of this latest book. It's one that I've been waiting for.
Well, thank you, and I'm glad that I just heard the other day that it's #1 according to the Blackboard Rating Service and also the BET. It's the #1 softback seller in America.
I'm not surprised. You take a decided historical tone with this book, but what's interesting about the way this book is put together, Dr. Anderson, is that it includes myriad factoids about history, black, white, and otherwise. But in addition to that, you are trying to set a record straight, a record full of holes, voids, and obvious omissions. You say that black history is not, or history in general, is not taught very well in the American public education system. How would you change the way it's taught?
The first thing I would do is I would have to base it on what I learned years ago when I was over education for the state of Florida. Being over the education system, I went in and reviewed some of the textbooks, Daryl. I found out in the state of Florida that invariably blacks only showed up twice in the history books. Either showed up in the course of slavery, where they were picking cotton in the fields, or secondly, they showed up in the civil rights movement, where they were demonstrating or rioting. And I tried to insist in the state of Florida that they put some blacks into the history book that really told the true story about black folk. And the book companies told me, the publishing companies said, well, Dr. Anderson, we can't do that. There's nothing about blacks. We don't have any accomplishments of black folk. That was the first thing that set me off. And that was a alarm bell off my head that somebody is not teaching it. And therefore, the white kids in the state of Florida, as well as the black kids, were being deprived of a true understanding of black folks' role in history. The second thing I found out, there was that in going into the black schools, invariably during the month of February, they call that Black History Month. And almost every school in the United States will have up the same 10 or 15 pictures on the wall of various individuals. And I would ask you right now to name those 10 or 15 individuals. You can do it very easily. And what they're doing is teaching our black kids that is black history. That's not black history either. Nobody ever talks about the major contributions that black folk have made. Not those well-known personalities, but the millions and millions of cotton pickers and ditch diggers and dishwashers and janitors. Those are the people who made the substantive contributions in this country. I want to make sure those people are put into the textbook. That's how America acquired its wealth. That's how it's maintained its wealth. And that's why blacks have also been subordinated in the society.
Indeed, you have gone that extra mile to talk about lots of different people in American history whose exploits are not limited to America, whose exploits are not limited to the black community. And in fact, you start off the book, one of the earliest characters you talk about is a young man whose exploits carried him into, through, or at least around Spain. You talk about Juan Latino and the American capital tax. What's the connection?
The American capital, he was about the last individual in Spain before the Untold policy went into effect, where officially black folk were identified as being the slave class, the laboring class of the world. And he was the last one going through college at that time. He was the last one to get a degree, the professional group. But at that same time, they passed in Spain a tax saying that any black person that had a degree, just not because of his education, but because he was black, had to pay a tax. And this country, excuse me, had the same thing, Daryl. All during slavery, it was called a capital tax. That same tax that was started in Spain carried forth through the slavery process in this country, which meant a black person, a black man, had to pay a tax. And usually it averaged about $15, not because of anything else, just mere on the fact that he was black. And what that money was used for was to subsidize schooling for whites and all kind of institutional programs for whites that black folk could not penetrate, were not included in. So in the society, throughout our society, whether it was in Spain or through America, black people have always paid a black tax just for the mere fact of their presence.
Another fact that you point out in the book talks about national holiday that will be coming up soon in our country, known as Thanksgiving. You say Thanksgiving may well have its roots in the black struggle.
Right, I think it did. Thanksgiving initially was a celebration by Indians in the fall, but it never was called Thanksgiving. The first time it was called Thanksgiving was in 1863, when President Lincoln declared it to be a day of Thanksgiving. But at the same time he put out the day of Thanksgiving, he also put out the Emancipation Proclamation that freed black folk. And those two were interrelated in giving thanks, and their celebration almost ran together. And so, but whenever people talk about Thanksgiving, they do not relate the fact that throughout history nobody ever had a Thanksgiving until he put out the proclamation, Emancipation Proclamation, in that year, and gave a national impetus to looking out for those people who were being freed and were due something thankful to God and to country. So there's a nationalism attached to Thanksgiving that reflected right over on the black people in this society.
And in fact, because of the Emancipation Proclamation, the events set in motion by the fates of war as well as the struggle between the North and South over slavery, you also illuminate a lot of the mystique, the myth, as well as the fact around one Mr. Abraham Lincoln and what his true motivations were concerning to free or not to free enslaved Africans. Talk a little bit about what happens in this book in terms of what you disclose there. Did Abraham Lincoln really want to free slaves?
No, his primary thing was try to maintain the Union. And that was the first thing. And secondly, in maintaining the Union, he wanted to help the North to redistribute the wealth out of the South. The wealth was pretty well contained in the South. And the North wanted to industrialize because, see, England already had its industrial revolution, and the Northerners were pressing the president to try to relocate the wealth to the North so they can have an industrial revolution in this country. And secondly, they wanted to be able to put the northern immigrants into the country, white immigrants coming to this country, into a position where they can make an income. See, in other words, the salary level was so low in the North, you can't work in a cheaper than free, so you had to get rid of slavery. But slavery was incidental to the fact they wanted to relocate the wealth, so and not divide the Union. So, but Lincoln never really expressed any positive feelings about black folk. His primary emphasis was that he wanted to be able to redistribute the wealth, and he was willing also to ship blacks out of the country. He came up with a couple of programs to relocate blacks either to Latin America or Central America or back to Africa.
You even quote former president as having gotten a laugh at a speech that he gave when, following the murder of an abolitionist, he joked that we have abolitionists where we come from too. In fact, we shot one the other day.
That's right. And he did some similar things too. As a matter of fact, he even sent a memorandum request over to the Congress to have Congress to appropriate funds to reimburse all the Southern white slaveholders for any loss, you know, and even if they were to lose that slavery with the relocation of the wealth in this country, he wanted to compensate them for reparations. And the Congress sent a letter back to him saying, we appreciate your interest in the South, but we don't even have that kind of money. You got almost 5 million black folk in this country. We've already invested over $8 billion into them. That is the largest amount of money and concentration of money in this country. The money invested in black slaves was larger than all the businesses in the United States and the federal government's budget put together. So Congress said, we don't have that kind of money. But Lincoln wanted to give reparations to Southern white plantations owners for any slaves they lost.
But in 1998, when blacks talk about reparations for free labor in slavery, they are virtually laughed to scorn. Why is that?
That's part of the hypocrisy in this country because, first thing, black folk have never made it an issue. They keep thinking that they won't get it. Black people are the only group of people I know in this country who've labored and suffered and never got compensated for it. We've compensated American Indians now for almost 360 years with reparations. Whites got reparation, which they call freedom dues, and they came out of indentured servantship. Jews have gotten reparations. Jews have picked up over $52 billion since World War II. Japanese have gotten 3 or 4 reparations. They got $22,000 each starting in 1990 from the United States. They've also gotten reparations from 2 cities in California and the state of California. And Japanese Americans who moved to Latin America and just came back into the country last year and picked up over $1 billion. The only people who've never gotten compensated is black folk. We even put money into Japan under what we call the Point 4 program, gave them $13 billion after we just got through bombing them. We also put another $14 billion into the Marshall Plan for Germans after we just finished bombing them. Black folk have never been compensated because black folk refused to make reparations an issue.
Talking about reparations, talking about the Germans, talking about what happened to Jews during the Holocaust, you mentioned in Dirty Little Secrets the fact that there were black Germans. In fact, there was a black German in particular by the name of Larry who lived in the town of Dusseldorf, along with many other blacks who lived in Germany who became prisoners in concentration camps who were forced to do the slave-type labor in those camps. However, the fact that they were being exterminated is a historic fact that has been vastly overlooked.
That's right. As a matter of fact, after World War I, there were a lot of black immigrants that came out of Africa that went to Germany. Also, the German recruited a lot of the Africans into some of their lower levels of their military. And so we had a lot of blacks living in Germany when the Holocaust, even before the Holocaust began. And they were the first to go, the first to be exterminated. But you notice how skillfully that has never been brought out, that all those blacks have been a part of the Holocaust and the execution of people in Germany. And yet when the compensation rewards were given out, not only were blacks not mentioned, but blacks had never gotten 1 penny of reparations out of the Holocaust in the 1930s.
Some would say that the link perhaps between those people and their survivors, and in fact, if there were any black survivors, which of course from your writing seems doubtful, could not be established, and therefore reparations can't be paid.
Well, that's the same technique that's used. That's why they refuse to pay blacks for slavery. They want to pretend that slavery ended in 1865. Slavery didn't end in 1865. Slavery became semi-slavery, what we call Jim Crow semi-slavery, ran up until 1968, and all those people are still alive.
When you talk about Jim Crowism, your book talks about the roots of Jim Crowism, symbolically at least. You talk about how the whole concept of Jim Crow was actually born out of the old minstrel show concept.
Well, it came out, as a matter of fact, one guy who was an entertainer. He saw a little black kid one day jumping around on the street doing a dance called Jump Jim Crow, jump around, skip around, jump Jim Crow, and he thought it was very cute, and he put it into the vaudeville act. And between about 1840s and up until about the 1930s, for almost 100 years, vaudeville was very popular in this country. But what they were doing was blackface and doing blackface, whites doing blackface comedy, trying to mimic black folks. They did it all the way up until Al Jolson. Al Jolson about the last one that did it. And on stage, then after that, you had Amos and Andy picked it up, and that carried forth all the way up to the present day, where you got white musicians singing black music. And as a matter of fact, back in the 1960s, there was one very popular manager of a guy they call the king of rock and roll, who said, if you can find me a white man that can sing like an Ian, I'll make him a millionaire. And so now what you have is all these white artists are now trying to imitate black folks, still doing the blackface makeup. You can find everything like most of your British singers all try to imitate, from the Bee Gees all the way up to Elton John to Michael Bolton. All of them are imitating black folks.
At least in the case of the British, they admit that they are copying the black music style.
Yes. As a matter of fact, almost every singer is copying black folk, because whites don't have any music. The only true art form in America is black music. And sadly, that's about a $150 billion a year industry, and black folk get less than 1%. But unfortunately, that's part of our fault, because right now down in the city in Texas, right now, they are recruiting black blues singers to come in and to teach white boys how to sing blues. They're going to call Blues Alley. They got a whole street they're building where they're going to have black folk to come in and teach white boys to play black music and to sing black, and so they can make money off it. And you got blacks that go out and do it.
Thank you.